right. Hello and welcome to Drive Ohio's webinar for round 3 of the electric vehicle infrastructure deployment under the NEVI program. My name is Brianna Bedaines. I am the Managing Director of Communications and Policy for Drive Ohio. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping items so everyone knows what to expect and how to participate. This meeting is being recorded and all comments are considered public record. At this time, audio for the audience has been muted to ensure that everyone can hear us by eliminating background noise. There will be a question and answer session immediately following the presentation, so participants can type their questions into the Q&A box at any point during the webinar. Next slide. The agenda for this morning is as follows. First, you'll hear from Drive Ohio Executive Director Preeti Chowdhury about our NEVI program updates. Next, Drive Ohio's NEVI Project Manager Santos Ramos will share an overview of the Round 3 procurement. And then our program management consultant Garver will go over the technical proposal elements and evaluation. And then at the end, as I mentioned, there will be an opportunity for questions and answers. I'm going to pass it over to Preeti to get us started.
Thank you, Brianna. Good morning, everyone. I'm Preeti Chowdhury. As Brianna mentioned, I lead Drive Ohio, and we are the team within the Ohio Department of Transportation that's responsible for the deployment of the NEVI program for Ohio. We are very excited to kick off this next round of procurement and glad to have all of you attending this morning. So I will start the conversation by providing a program overview for the NEVI program broadly, which most of you are probably familiar with, but it's been a while. I was just saying it's been a while since we have done a meeting like this, or kind of, it's been a minute since our last procurement. So as a reminder to everyone, the NEVI formula program was established by the bipartisan infrastructure law. It allocated $5 billion over 5 years to states for EV charging infrastructure, and the goal was to establish a nationwide network of chargers to support long distance travel. Ohio received a portion of $140 million over that 5 years, and there is a funding split. The federal share of project costs is capped at 80%, so the remaining 20% will be covered by private partners. After we have built out, the initial kind of requirement of the program was to build out this charging network along alternative fuel corridors, designated alternative fuel corridors. And once those corridors are built out, the funds become discretionary, which means they're a bit more flexible in nature. So the past couple of years, we in Ohio have been hard at work on this program. We hit the ground running in 2022, really when the program got moving. We awarded our first round of procurement in September of 2023. The second round was awarded in September of 24. And in total, we have 33 sites under contract, 19 of which are actually open and operational, and 14 of which are currently in design, hopefully, and will be opening next year in 2026. So that's about a total of 33 million that we have designated for the build out of those sites. Of course, now we are here to talk about round 3. So just to give you all some background into what we've been doing in the past year, things have been busy. At the beginning of this year, the new federal administration reviewed the program, and interim final guidance or revised guidance for the NEVI program was released at the beginning of August. A lot of the updates to the program surrounded loosening requirements on deployment plans specifically. And as a reminder, the deployment plans, all states are required to submit a deployment plan every year, and those deployment plans were a mechanism to unlock that year's portion of your allotted funding. So those requirements for that plan were loosened. The revised guidance also indicated federal highways preference for co-locating chargers at retail locations that have on-site amenities, restrooms, a lot of the things that we in Ohio were already looking for. They also encouraged the selection of charging locations where the operator is also the site host. So essentially, expressing preference for property owners to be the lead developers. We submitted our EV infrastructure deployment plan at the very beginning of September and worked with our local federal highway division. They worked really closely with us. We kind of reviewed our approach in advance, and they were able to approve our plan by September 8th. So since then, we've been thinking about how to structure this next round of procurement. The interim final guidance also provided some new guidelines on the determination of fully built out certification. So in with the new guidance, essentially states could provide a reasonable explanation and determination of fully built out status with, of course, evidence for such, and Federal Highway would review that and certify whether we are kind of meeting our criteria for fully built out certification. So we worked on that, and we actually were able to receive our fully built out determination or certification by Federal Highway by the end of September. Now that we have this fully built out certification, as I mentioned before, the initial kind of overarching requirement for the program was to build out stations along alternative fuel corridors. Now that we have determined that those corridors are built out, and when we say that, we are, for your awareness, we are considering stations under contract or planned stations to be part of that fully built out determination. Now that that has been achieved, we can use the opportunity or use our remaining funding to build charging on any public road or in other publicly accessible locations. So we do not need to stick to the alternative fuel corridors moving forward. And I say that because it informs this current round, round 3, which we are going to talk about more today. So I will just provide some high-level goals and intentions for this round of procurement, and my colleague Santos will get into some of the details, and then our program manager, Mike, as well. So since we have fully built out certification, our first goal and intention is to provide some location, some geographic flexibility, essentially allow for these stations to be built anywhere in the state. We are also going to enable charging flexibility. We still would like fast charging for all NEVI funded stations, but we do understand there are our limitations in especially rural parts of our state. And so we are reducing the minimum power threshold a bit to account for that challenge. We want to continue prioritizing high quality sites and experienced developers. I think that's not really too dissimilar to procurement rounds of the past, but just want to underscore that. And last but not least, and this is maybe a big change versus our past rounds of procurement, we want to consolidate contracts by developer. Essentially, in our past rounds of procurement, each station, each site was its own contract, its own project. And in this round of procurement, we are asking developers submit one package with a number of sites. I think we've identified a minimum number of four sites to be proposed, and I don't think we have a maximum, but someone can correct me if I'm wrong. But essentially, we would like to contract with fewer developers and have those developers build a number of sites, and all of those sites would be under one contract. And we think this is just a way to reduce some of the administrative burden for managing these projects and contracts. So, if we have 50 sites and 5 developers, instead of having 50 contracts, we'd have 5 contracts, one per developer. And we'll get into some of the detail. I expect there'll be some questions about that, but that's what we're kind of going to get into in the coming slides. So with that, I will pass it over to Santos to describe further some of these updates to round 3.
Awesome. Thank you, Priti. Alrighty, so here I'm going to be highlighting the 5 key updates that we made to the RFP in this new round 3 procurement. So first, as Priti mentioned, we can start with geographic flexibility. This is perhaps the biggest change for this round. Unlike previous rounds, which focused on predefined zones and corridor groups, round 3 removes all geographic constraints. So proposers are now empowered to identify and submit candidate sites statewide. A major process improvement that successful sites awarded to a proposer will be held under a single contract, which is similar to what Priti was already talking about, rather than requiring individual contracts for every site. Alrighty, so number 2, we're essentially broadening the scope of what a candidate site can be. We're now going to be allowing planned developments. This is something that we had heard from industry before. We weren't necessarily allowing them um, in previous rounds, but now we're opening the door to future focused sites. So proposers are now, like I mentioned, allowed to provide plan developments as candidate sites, and don't necessarily have to meet the existing location requirement that we had previously provided in our previous RFPs. Okay, so number 3, bear with me because this is going to be a long one. Number 3 here is essentially our contracting opportunity. So this which is essentially expanding to offer multiple contracting opportunities. This changes directly supports our goals of redundancy and coverage expansion through a single request for proposals. Here, Drive Ohio intends to award up to, I believe, 10 contracts. That's the conversation we're in right now. But we still haven't set that in stone. We'll make sure to finalize that number by when we release the RFP. If it's not up to 10 contracts, it'll be either 12 or 15. Yeah, this aggressive approach essentially is designed specifically to increase AFC redundancy and significantly expand our corridor charging and filling the gaps across the state. To maximize flexibility, particularly in rural areas, we're also introducing a tiered approach to power standards. We'll now be allowing 2 power standards in round 3. So essentially, the tiered approach allows for greater flexibility in candidate site selection. We're still going to require the 150 kW DCFC that came with the old or that is in the NEVI program requirements and guidelines if the location is along an alternative fuel corridor. Essentially, all charging equipment located within 2.5 miles of an alternative fuel corridor is going to have to comply with the 4 ports, 150 kW each. However, we're also going to be permitting 100 kW DCFC for all non-AFC locations. This is essentially a strategic move to enable the development in rural or underserved areas across Ohio. Lastly, we'll look at the updated evaluation criteria. So here we're shifting the focus of our scoring to prioritize quality and stability in round 3, and it will place a heavier emphasis on 2 key areas. First, the proposer team qualifications, and second, the candidate sites that are at safe, essentially at safe retail locations with on-site amenities, especially where the proposer is also the property owner. In summary, we're valuing experienced developers and the quality of the sites over the quantity of the sites. Awesome. Thanks, Mike. So now that we covered the main updates, I think like the next thing is like that we should cover is the when and how this is going to happen. So the process essentially is going to begin. The procurement is essentially going to open. We plan to release the RFP on December 2nd, and then we're hoping to. We're actually going to be allowing for approximately 8 weeks to proposers for proposers to respond to the RFP, with the proposal due date being February 5th, and then we hope to announce successful proposers in April of 2026 and anticipate providing notice to proceed in September of 2026. Next slide, please. Alrighty, so now let's look at the logistics of how you will interact with this procurement. Just like previous rounds, we're going to continue using the BidExpress platform. To get started, proposers should obtain the final RFP directly from BidExpress, and it'll be available on the release date. You'll need to search the solicitations for the key phrase o.nevi. If you have any issues, we do have a Q&A section on the RFP that allows you to interact with us. So we'd be happy to support. But this approach has not failed us in the past, so we're expecting it to be fairly easy to be able to find. The full RFP package, including all of the necessary attachments in Microsoft Word and Excel template formats, can be downloaded right from the Bid Express site. And an important administrative point is that some of the P3 agreement terms and conditions are still under development, especially because we kind of like switched our approach to how we're going to be doing contracting now. So um, we hope to be able to provide that. We want to make sure that we are assuring the clarity and providing those documents. So as soon as that's ready, we'll make sure to provide the terms on the site. And then now, regarding access, I know that's been a question that's happened before in previous rounds. You will need to create an account on the platform simply to view the RFP and the solicitation details. However, there is no cost to view the documents. There's only a cost associated if you plan to submit a final proposal. We will provide more specific details on that in a little bit when Mike goes over to the actual process on how to submit the proposal. Alrighty, I think that's it, Mike. I think the rest should be covered. So you go now. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Waskowitz. I'm with Garver, the program management consultant helping support Drive Ohio in the NEVI program. So Sancho set me up pretty well with the information getting into Bid Express and what goes into the proposal. So we're going to cover what's in the proposal overall, and then we'll walk through each of the different sections of the proposal that are required, with the first being administrative information, the second being technical proposal focused on general elements, and then the third section is the technical proposal related to the candidate sites. You'll notice in the table there are a few restrictions on page limits. The technical proposal general is limited to 2 pages, and the candidate sites are limited to 4. And in addition to that, you are allowed additional pages for a site schematic, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in upcoming slides. So that may seem like a limited number of pages, but we've really tried to streamline that, what we're asking for. So I think you'll see as we walk through some of this that that should be sufficient room to provide responses. Finally, section 4 is the price proposal, and we'll talk about that a little bit more detail on what we want for the content in a future slide. All right, so let's jump into the administrative information and some of the details about how to enter information into the various components of the proposal. So the administrative information includes general proposer information. It also includes proposer certifications, which also consists of Buy America, Build America certification. And there's finally a signature page. We do, throughout the proposal or throughout the RFP and the forms provided for the proposal, structure those so that you can add text in the fields where we want you to add text. So you can't just add text or add rows to these. We want you to use the forms that we have and provide the text where prompted. I know there have been a few mistakes in the past where we forgot to turn off the restrictions. If that does happen, please send us a note so that we can turn that back on and re-upload the file, and you can grab it off of Bid Express. But we'll try to do our best to make sure that those are all those restrictions are lifted. So we really only want the information that's requested. If you do, there is an opportunity to provide additional attachments when we request that additional information. So there are some parts of it in the administrative information in attachment 1 where you may need to attach information such as trade secrets. Those types of things, we want to make sure that you can attach those to the end of the document and then just create that PDF for the administrative information and get it submitted. And we'll go over that in a little bit more information. I just mentioned that trade secret information. One of the things that we ask for as part of this attachment number 1 is to identify any information within the proposal so that we can be aware of it if there is a public information request. And also, we are asking that you attach or append the redacted pages or redacted pages. So if there is information that you want to redact, because it is trade secret, take that information, redact it, and attach a version of the proposal or the redacted pages of the proposal to the end of that attachment 1. That would be greatly appreciated. The next section is the technical proposal general. What we're looking at here, again, we've really streamlined these sections. So we're trying to get to the core information that we really want to understand so that we can evaluate the proposal. And what we're really focused on here is the qualifications of the proposer firm and the EVSE operator who's supporting them for these installations and ultimately operations. We really do value qualified teams with extensive EV infrastructure experience. So part B here is just getting some of the basic on how many ports are installed, how many ports are operational, those types of things. And part C, the operations and maintenance elements, we want to know a little bit about the O&M warranty that you're providing with this, and also the approach that you're taking for routine maintenance during the operating period. So those are the things we're primarily focused on in the technical proposal general. Those are going to apply to all the sites. And next, the attachment 3 or section 3 is the technical proposal for the candidate sites. For each candidate site, we are going to want a separate PDF document. So this is consistent with how we've ran previous sections if you were involved in round 1 or round 2. Part A captures the basic information about the candidate site. Each of those candidate sites, we do want to make sure within that part A that we designate a candidate site ID. Those should be sequentially numbered based on the number of sites that you are proposing within this proposal. So use that ID number when you're referencing things in other sections. I think attachment 4, which we'll talk about in a minute with the price proposal, you'll be putting each of those candidate site IDs in that price proposal as well. Within some of the forms, within the fields where we want you to provide information, there are drop-down boxes, so it's restricted on what you can actually respond. We don't want you creating new selections or new options. You should be restricted there. So those drop boxes, pick the one that best applies to you. There are other sections, obviously, that we allow you to just enter text in those sections, and feel free to do that. For these candidate sites, just to emphasize, the ODOT really values the co-location of EVSE at retail locations with on-site amenities that provide safe locations and restrooms. And that's as recommended, as I think Preeti said earlier, in the NEVI interim final guidance. Right, continuing on the candidate sites, we do have a section where we're checking the site access rights. And the reason we're checking this is we need to make sure you have an appropriate right of access to the property so that we can conduct NEPA at the beginning, after selection, and then ultimately throughout construction and the operating period of the contract. We need to be able to observe the site during construction. We need to be able to check out equipment during the operating period if we need to. The information that we ask for about the property owner, we are going to confirm that information by checking the county auditor's office. If you are aware that the records on the auditor's site are not correct, please provide an explanation and attach any documents to the attachment 3 to support ownership of the site so that we can be aware that there may be a disconnect here, but there's a reason for it, and we can take a look at that information. Proposers that are not the property owner or a site host that has access rights via a lease, or some other instrument, must include an executed site host agreement with their proposals. It's highly preferred that you also take that the terms that are in the draft P3 agreement that's going to be attached that are in Exhibit 7. And this is getting into the details a little bit, but there are some terms that we want to see in the site host agreement. And it would be preferred to have those incorporated now when you submit your proposal, as opposed to having to do that prior to executing the ultimate contract. Finally, we do ask you to identify some risks and provide us some information about site readiness. We're really just making sure that the site is feasible and that if there are any risks associated on the site, that we have mitigation strategies considered so that we have confidence that the project is going to be able to move forward. One of the other things we asked for as part of attachment 3 is the amenities and enhancements. So there's relatively limited number of amenities and enhancements that we're asking for this time. We're really focusing on things like canopies and pull-through spaces, security cameras. So we've really tried to, again, streamline this so that we don't have to sift through a lot of information. We're just focusing on the areas that we want to see. One of the other things that is unique to this round, we're really just focusing on the site itself. The surrounding properties, offsite amenities, those aren't going to be considered. We're really focusing on just that location, that parcel, and I want to know about the amenities on that site. Further, restrooms, just a note, they do need to be available for at least a certain period of the day, which will be defined in the RFP. So we want to make sure that's an amenity that is provided access, that does provide access to those using it for charging. The next item as part of attachment 3 is the EVSE equipment and enhancements. So we really just want to know what type of, what type of chargers you are installing, what is the power related to those, make sure you meet the minimums, and then if there's any additional things that exceed the minimum requirements that we have an interest in, we've asked you to identify those as well. And then finally, as part of the attachment fee, we'll be asking you to attach a candidate site schematic. The site schematic should be, this is going to vary from site to site based on the size of the parcel that you're working with. But we'd like you to make sure that it's zoomed to a scale that allows details to be seen more easily. We are asking for a decent bit of information, and when it gets, in some cases, some of those things can be really hard to see. So if that happens, please feel free to add details. It really helps us look at these sites and understand what you're trying to do and make sure that you are compliant. We are going to allow a second sheet to make sure that you're able to add details, and those details can scale up a little bit just so that we're able to read the details and make sure they're legible. So feel free to do that. The things that we really want to see here: charging stalls, the associated dimension for those, including specifically ADA is an area of concern that we want to make sure that those are providing the adequate width compared to the other spaces. If you're identifying, if you can identify utility lines, existing overhead lighting, proposed overhead lighting, security features like cameras, we want to see those types of things in these exhibits to the extent possible. One of the other things that it's important to identify in these exhibits is the anticipated point of connection with the existing utility infrastructure. So please do identify that to the best of your ability. If you are going to provide a canopy to cover the EV chargers, make sure that if the foundations for that canopy are going to be 6 feet or deeper, we also are asking for a detail related to that foundation structure. So provide us the details so that we have that information about the depth of foundation. Ultimately, there's a lot of more instructions that are in the RFP you'll be able to take a look at in more detail. And again, this schematic, this is something that will be appended at the end of the PDF created for attachment 3. And we will provide this example in Bid Express so that you can take a closer look at it. So we'll talk a little bit about the price proposal. The basics of this, we are going to have a tab within a spreadsheet for each candidate site. We want you to fill out the tab for each candidate site. Please don't just fill out one, and say it applies to everything. We think that each site is unique, so please fill out a tab for each one. Those will be available for you. Again, the candidate site ID should be associated with this so we can connect it to the other portions in attachment 3 so that we know that they're connected. And we are going to have a summary page that's shown here. You can see the quick links. Those will be able to take you to the various sites, the price proposal. So this is going to be a single Excel file. So no matter how many sites that you are proposing on, you'll be able to just submit one Excel file. And to be clear, we do want the Excel file. Please do not submit a PDF. We definitely want the Excel file. Really kind of hard to see this slide, but we just want to highlight a few things to the best of our ability. We want you to identify the eligible costs for which you plan to use NEVI funds. And I think we mentioned it previously, though, there is a minimum 20% match from the private developer who's going to be installing the chargers or the proposer. That 20% should be a whole number. Please don't provide the calculation with the numbers that ultimately ends up being something different. I think we've tried to restrict that in the way we ask for the information, but we do need that to be a whole number. So the components of the price proposal, the first part is the utility estimate. And right now at this point, when you submit your proposal, this is truly an estimate that you'll develop. We don't expect you to have the time to necessarily work with the utility companies to come up with a final estimate. We'll defer that to the contingent award period, and the utility estimate portion of this won't be used in the scoring of the overall proposal. The final part 2 is the committed pricing, and these are the elements like the design and the site construction and the O&M work that's planned. These are committed prices, and these will be included in the P3 agreement, and those can't be changed after the proposal submittal. Finally, part 3 of this is the determination based on the amount, the cost and the percentage that the private entity is going to, or the proposer is going to contribute to the project. And that'll generate a baseline reimbursement cap. And that's the number essentially that of the amount of NEVI funds that will be provided for the site. So with all that, the proposal score for the candidate site will be calculated as shown here. We are looking at this as an overall proposal, not individual sites. So when we talk about those candidate sites, what we're going to do for the sites, these different areas is we'll take a portion of the proportion of the sites that have the amenities will be considered. So essentially average it out. So we'll determine the score for each individual candidate site, and then we'll use those individual candidate site scores to calculate an average. And that will allow us to develop the scores for like the candidate site type and the candidate site amenities and also the EVSE equipment. So if you have a site where you add additional ports, that may give you some of the EVSE equipment enhancements, a higher score. But if you don't do that everywhere, essentially your score will get adjusted accordingly based on the proportion of sites that have those additional ports. Ultimately, the price proposals will be scored similar to how we've looked at them in the previous round, where we looked at it on a per port basis. So we're going to take the overall proposal cost, adding up the cumulative site cost or candidate site cost, and then we'll look at the lowest price per port. That'll get the total maximum 150, and the remaining proposers will get a percentage of that based on their per port cost. So obviously the RFP will have more detailed information than this slide, but hopefully that gives you an overview on our intent. So next, want to talk a little bit about the proposal submission. For those that have submitted Bid Express before, this should be very similar. We will be using Bid Express, as Santos mentioned earlier. You do need to register with Bid Express and select an account type to be able to get access to view the RFP. And again, that's no cost. But if you want to submit a bid, you do have to pay a fee. And those fees are on the slide here right now anyway. They are $60 per month to be a member. Or you can just pay to submit a bid for this specific solicitation. So that's $50 per solicitation. So again, ODOT won't cover that expense, but it is a relatively low cost to get your proposal submitted. As Santos mentioned earlier too, you should be able to, once you have your account and get into Bid Express, you can search ODOT NEVI and you should be able to find those solicitations. If that does change for some reason, we'll obviously let everybody know. Some details about the proposal submission. All the candidate site technical proposals shall be packed into separate PDFs. We'll have, as part of the process, I think Preeti mentioned earlier, there's 4 candidate sites that are required to be submitted. So there will be a requirement, a mandatory 4 uploads that you have within Bid Express. And then there will be a section where there are optional sites and you can upload into those optional sites. So we currently have Bid Express set up for a total of 30 candidate sites. But if there are more that are needed, if you need more than that, if you contact Santos Ramos or send a question through Bid Express, we should be able to make an adjustment to the template that will allow more to be uploaded. Each of the candidate sites technical proposals should include the attachment 3 file, and then the site schematic, and then any other applicable information that was to be appended, like the site host agreement, or if it's a plan development, information related to that plan development, like schedule and those types of things. So those sites that aren't currently open to the public, we need a little bit more information, and that's where we're looking for that information. As I mentioned earlier, the price proposal, we do need that to be in Excel format, and there are tabs for each of those. And ultimately, there are naming conventions that are detailed in the RFP. Please make sure to follow those and make sure to use those candidate site ID numbers when you're naming the files for upload into the Bid Express. So this is just a quick overview of what Bid Express is going to look like for you. There will be a select a button that allows you to upload the file into this window. So it's relatively user friendly. So you can just see where you're supposed to click to upload the file. And the one warning we do give folks is, since you are potentially uploading a number of different files, make sure you give yourself enough time prior to the deadline to do this. There have been situations where folks were planning to upload, 25 files, but it just takes a minute or so for each of those to upload, and they only got through, not the full amount anyway. So please keep that in mind when you're submitting the files. So this is a similar situation. As I mentioned, the previous slide, I'll drop back to that. It showed these 4 mandatory candidate sites that need to be included. Here on this next one, you can start to see that there are these optional that you're not required to upload more than these, but if you have them, go ahead and upload those. All right. And finally, selection results. Those will be uploaded, emailed to the proposer contact person that you identify in the attachment 1. So please make sure that that information stays current. If something were to happen where it's changed, let us know right away. After selection, we did want to note that there are some considerations when we go into that contingent award period. There may be some sites that you included in your proposal, and even though you were selected as a best value proposer, we may choose to non-perform sites. Those sites that are just not suitable or inconsistent with the goals or needs of the program, we may choose to just non-perform those and move forward with initiating NEPA on just those sites that the department determines are in their best interest. So we will initiate NEPA activities quickly, and we don't want to make changes to the EVSE locations. However, if there is a need to do so in order to move forward, ODOT may review that and may approve those requests. We also want utility coordination during contingent award to start quickly. So once you've been notified that you're a best value proposer, we want to initiate that quickly within 10 days of selection notification so that you can make sure that you can get a good price for the utility improvements that gets included in the P3 agreement at execution. And finally, as I mentioned before, the site host agreements, if we do need more information on those or need to modify some of those terms, we may need to reach out and take care of that prior to contract execution. So I think one thing maybe just to add to all of this as far as the selection process goes, as we've talked about, there's going to be a number of contracts to get, or we anticipate a number of contracts being awarded through this one RFP. So, we are going to score the highest proposer. Whoever scores the highest based on that, based on the scoring, they will be identified as an apparent best value proposer who will be offered to go into contingent award. Similarly, the next highest scoring proposal would move forward. Once we hit a point where we feel like that the quality of the proposals, it's basically at ODOT's sole discretion as far as how many contracts get awarded up to the maximum. So I think with that, I've covered everything related to the proposal, and I'll open it up for questions.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. So we are going to answer as many questions as we can in real time. And if we don't get to your question for some reason or need to get some more information before we answer, we'll make sure to follow up after this webinar. If you could please put your questions into the Q&A tab so I make sure that I don't miss any questions. I have captured the ones that have gone in the chat thus far, but try to get them in the Q&A just to make it a little bit easier for me. So I will start with the first question was, there was a slide indicating awarding 10 contracts, but you previously stated ODOT was looking for a single contract. Can you please clarify the intent? Are the 10 contracts 10 sites, or are they with 10 separate entities?
Yeah, I can take that question. And sorry for any confusion. So we intend to contract with 10 entities. And I should say that number 10, or the maximum number, is being determined. We'll obviously have it finalized when the RFP is published, but whether it's 10 or 12, that's an intent to have 10 or 12 developer contracts, and each of those contracts will be to build a certain number of sites, and we've established that we want at least 4 sites per contract. And this is, really an attempt for us to move quickly, to get stations built quickly. I think what we've heard, and we've got a little bit of experience from the past couple of years, and what we've heard from folks in the community and EV drivers is just more charging is better. And again, we determined based on our kind of decided upon criteria that the alternative fuel corridors have enough, at least in existing and planned charging, they have a baseline minimum. I won't say it's necessarily exceeding expectation yet, but so this round is really intended to build as much as quickly as possible, and we'll sort of see where we land after that. So it would be 10 developer contracts for who knows how many sites. A minimum of, I can't say a minimum, but hopefully a bunch. Oh,
Mike,
Mike,
if
if
you're
you're
trying to,
talking.
yeah, if you're trying to add, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I was just going to add on a little bit that we do have a maximum is pretty. We're going to set a maximum number of contracts, but ultimately we may be budget constrained as far as the number of sites that come in. If we get, 7 fantastic proposals that, really get us to the point where we're not sure that we can move forward, or if there are just some proposals that maybe while they meet the minimum requirements, really just didn't align with some of our um, the desired outcomes that we state in the goals and within the RFP, those we'll have to make a decision on, and Preeti and the team at Drive Ohio will do that.
Yep. All right, the next question is, does Drive Ohio anticipate there being any additional NEVI funds available after round 3?
Based on just an initial sort of cursory scan, probably yes. And in our deployment plan, we do indicate this round of procurement kind of hits 2 goals. Likely hits redundancy and also just charging off of AFC corridors, obviously, since that's open. But the other goal that we have is around charging at multimodal facilities and for communities. And so we will probably have another round targeted at those multimodal facilities and communities.
All right, next question for the non-AFC locations. Will the 100 kilowatt power output allow limited amperage solutions? Some supposed 100 kilowatt stations have a 200 amp limit, so most vehicles with a nominal voltage around 400 won't see the full advertised speed.
Yeah, I can take that on, Brianna. So yeah, it's a valid and important observation, but just based on the NEVI minimum standards and requirements, 23 CFR 680, they don't necessarily specify a minimum amperage requirement for non-AFC locations. So it only addresses the 23 CFR 680 only addresses power delivery and simultaneous charging capabilities for non-AFC locations. So with that said, we do recognize the concern, but we're going to continue to allow proposals for non-AFC stations for charging stations that meet the regulatory requirements.
And just to add to that, Santos, a little bit, we do have some language within the P3 agreement within Exhibit 3 that talks a little bit about that, and it is being updated in consideration of the 100 kilowatt chargers. So there will be some new information in the P3 agreement and the technical requirements.
Great. All right, the next is a comment about consolidating the number of contracts with individual owners, but also prioritizing contracting with site owners or property owners, and whether that limits the pool of applicants or competitive nature of the investment.
Yeah, I can take that one. It certainly could. I think the intent again is to build as many stations as we can with this round. And I think that that's, that kind of leads to the preference for property owners. I will say, and I know there's another question about this, I believe, and it's all going to be detailed in the RFP, but I believe we offer or we will award the same number of points in our sort of scoring where we are expressing those preferences. We have the same number of points allocated for a property owner and for a proposer that has an executed site host agreement. And all of this, this determination is really based on our past experience. So when we have worked with developers in the past that may not have had site host agreements, or obviously we're not the property owners, it's just a bit more risk on our front that contract will go all the way, or the project will go all the way through to completion. And so we're trying to de-risk these projects by expressing that preference for property owners and folks with executed site host agreements.
Great. So that answered the next question. So the same number of points to property owners as to non-property owners with executed site host agreements. The next question is, will these sites require EVITP certified electricians?
Yeah, I can take that one. Yeah, essentially the answer is yes. Any federally funded EV charging station subject to 23 CFR 680 require EVITP certified electricians.
Great. Next question, is there any guidance as far as where additional sites would be most beneficial to EV driving public, similar to what Drive Ohio has done in the past where they've kind of identified preferred locations?
I can take that. So short answer is no. This will be not geographically constrained. It's constrained. We don't have any location preferences for this round. And again, idea being we want to build as many chargers as we can. And in this case, we're allowing proposers to propose those sites wherever in Ohio they are. I think once we receive all the proposals, we can take a step back and see sort of what the gaps are. But big picture, we wanted this round to kind of be an accelerator and move us forward.
Great. The next question is more of a technical question. Outside of the submission being in PDF format, will it be required for a certain character limitation size or font the proposal will have to be submitted in? I don't know if Mike, if you want to address that one.
Yeah, all of those issues are addressed in the RFP. There are constraints, and the forms that are set up, they do come if you just use the base font set in, it should be fine. But those are primarily controlled by uh, the forms that we're using. But there are also, for those things that are not specifically in the forms, there are some requirements.
Next question, do cities or counties have the ability to advocate or offer up a particular site in their area?
That's a really good question. The best way I'd recommend, I think yes, but we've always taken the stance that we want a turnkey proposal. So we want a developer to propose with all of the pieces and parts, including those site host agreements like we've mentioned, equipment providers, construction teams, etc. So probably the best way to do that if a city is interested in being a host is to connect with a developer team, and we have a partner directory on our website, on our NEVI webpage, so we can share that link. And there are a number of different industry partners on that list, but you can probably identify. I think we have categories, but you can identify the types of folks you might want to reach out to.
Great. And the next question is, will any future funds be dedicated to level 2 chargers?
I think that is to be determined. In general, we would prefer NEVI funds be used for fast charging, since there at least have been other sources of funding for community-based charging. But with that being said, once this round is complete and we sort of see see where we land in terms of placement, in terms of how many chargers how many projects we can initiate, we'll revisit that question and make a determination for that, hopefully last round of procurement next year.
Great. That is all the questions I see. So folks are more than welcome to follow up with questions if you think of something after the fact. The recording of this webinar, as long as everything went okay, will be posted on our website, and along with additional information, and you can expect the official RFP in the next few weeks. So thank you so much for your time and for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.